In the world of luxury watches, prices rise and fall like tides. Limited editions, celebrity endorsements, and historical significance all play a role. But sometimes, a single watch defies logic entirely. It doesn't just appreciate, it skyrockets. And that is exactly what happened with one particular Rolex, a model whose value has increased tenfold in just a few short decades. At first glance, it looks like a typical stainless steel Rolex Daytona. Its polished case, iconic oyster bracelet, and classic black dial appear familiar to any enthusiast. But subtle details reveal a story that collectors whisper about in hushed tones. This is the Daytona Paul Newman Tropical, one of the rarest variants ever made, with a history so unique that it transformed from an ordinary tool watch into a holy grail of horology. The story begins in the late 1960s. Rolex had partnered with its Italian distributors to market a special Daytona variant, using exotic dial designs that contrasted sharply with the standard models. One specific design, nicknamed the Paul Newman dial, featured contrasting subdials with Art Deco numerals. Production was tiny, only a few hundred pieces worldwide, and the watches were sold quietly in boutique shops in Italy and the US. What makes the tropical variant exceptional is what time and sunlight did to the dial. The original black surface over decades slowly faded to a warm chocolate brown, a process collectors call tropicalization. Unlike other watches that simply aged, each dial developed a unique pattern of patina, turning the watch into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. No two tropical Paul Newmans look the same. Yet rarity alone doesn't explain the tenfold price increase. The real story is personal. One specific watch, the one now commanding astronomical sums at auction, was once owned by an anonymous Hollywood actor in the 1970s. It traveled from film sets to private parties, always quietly on the wrist of someone who appreciated its understated sophistication. A single scratch on the bezel and a slightly worn bracelet became part of its character. Evidence of a life lived rather than a piece frozen in a display case. In 2017, this exact watch surfaced at a Geneva auction. Experts immediately recognized its condition, provenance, and tropical dial. Initial estimates suggested it might fetch $200,000. When the gavel fell, the final price was over $1.5 million. The crowd erupted in disbelief. What had once been an attainable luxury item had become an untouchable collector's dream overnight. Several factors contributed to this meteoric rise. Scarcity. Only a few hundred Paul Newman Daytonas with tropical dials exist, and even fewer remain in excellent condition. Historical significance. It represents an era of Rolex experimentation and niche marketing, bridging the gap between professional tool watches and cultural icons. Celebrity provenance. Watches with verifiable ownership by well-known figures attract a massive premium. Market dynamics. Collectors are willing to pay exponentially more for a watch with both historical and emotional value. Storytelling. Unlike mass-produced luxury items, this Daytona tells a story of time, fame, and human life, making it priceless in a way numbers alone cannot capture. The explosion of the secondary market also amplified the effect. Enthusiasts, investors, and speculators began to treat the Daytona as not just a watch, but a financial asset, driving demand and prices higher. It wasn't merely about mechanics or brand. It was about owning a piece of history, a tangible connection to an era when Rolex's design, culture, and craftsmanship intersected perfectly. Today, the Paul Newman Tropical Daytona is more than a timekeeping device. It is a symbol of exclusivity, heritage, and the fascinating way value is assigned in the luxury world. Every auction highlights new stories, one sold by a private collector in Asia, another discovered tucked away in a European safe for decades. Each transaction reminds us that rarity and history, combined with human fascination, can transform even a wristwatch into $1 million legend. So, why is this Rolex selling for 10 times its original price? Because it is not just a watch. It is a living relic, a piece of history, a narrative wrapped in steel and time, and a reminder that in the world of horology, stories often matter far more than numbers. But the strangest part came after the rediscovery. Once the Redline 6210X surfaced and the shockwave settled, collectors didn't just examine the watch. They investigated why Rolex reacted the way it did. Rolex is famously silent. They don't explain, they don't argue, they don't engage rumors. Yet, anonymously, former employees began hinting at something far larger than a failed prototype. The Redline project wasn't merely a high-beat movement. It was part of a broader experiment that Rolex officially erased from its history. Inside the company, the 6210X belonged to what was once called Programme Rouge, or simply the Red Program. It wasn't a department, it wasn't a team, it was a sealed-off room in Rolex's Geneva facility, accessible only to engineers with special clearance. Their mission wasn't improving existing models, it was exploring ideas too risky, too experimental, too radical for Rolex's public image. Titanium cases, electromagnetic dampening systems, exotic lubricants, unfinished ceramic blends, high-beat movements achieving unprecedented accuracy. Most experiments never left the room. Most were dismantled, documented, then destroyed. But the 6210X did leave, somehow. And that sparked fear inside Rolex. If one prototype escaped, could others have too? Rumors spread that a second Redline watch may have been smuggled out during the 1970s quartz crisis, when thousands of watchmakers were laid off. Some suggested disgruntled employees kept prototypes as souvenirs. Others believed Rolex intentionally masked certain serial ranges to hide abandoned projects. Collectors began hunting for ghost serials, numbers not on official lists, but appearing on watches in flea markets, pawn shops, and forgotten drawers. What they found wasn't another Redline, but something equally disturbing. 3 watches appeared, from different countries, purchased decades apart, all containing movements with unusual machining marks and faint red indicators beneath the dial. Authentic Rolex components, but ones the company had never publicly acknowledged. Historians noted they all fell within the same narrow serial range as the 6210X. Questions followed. Were these early Redline drafts, rejected prototypes, or test units that never returned? Suddenly, Rolex's silence made sense. It wasn't a single escaped watch. It was an entire shadow chapter of R&D. The controversy escalated in 2014 during a private Hong Kong auction. A collector said he was approached by a man claiming to work for a Swiss watch company, offering a staggering sum, not for the 6210X, but for any information on other Red Program prototypes. The man said one sentence, the collector never forgot. Those watches were never meant to exist, and if they resurface, they could damage more than just the brand. Some believe Rolex feared these weren't only experimental successes, but failures. Lubricants degrading into corrosive residue, materials cracking under pressure, high-beat components that could seize catastrophically. Even one public failure could threaten the brand's myth of indestructible engineering. And Rolex guards its reputation ruthlessly. Today, collectors suspect 2 or 3 Red Program prototypes still exist in private hands, unknown, unrecognized, potentially worth millions. But the 6210X remains the crown jewel, the watch that escaped, the watch Rolex wants forgotten, the watch that challenges the brand's legendary perfection. If Rolex could bury an entire experiment, what else lies hidden behind Geneva's walls? And more hauntingly, what happens when the next Redline finally resurfaces?